Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Prestaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharne Nirla Vishesha Shunyavadi Paschyatyade Shatarne Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadha Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare Vanchakalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha Paritanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Hare Krishna. So, devotees, we left off last night at the beginning, more or less, of the second section of the second chapter. Second section means from verse 11 to verse 30. And it's all about Gyan, the nature of the soul, and how the soul is eternal, and different very positive considerations for Arjuna on the basis of the soul being eternal. So, 11 to 30, and we mentioned there are subsections. Let me just remind you about those. It won't take a minute. From verse 11 to verse 13, and then verse 16 to verse 25, these are a subsection in which the message basically is that death is just a matter of the soul changing bodies, so it's not a big thing. It's going to happen anywhere. Don't make a big issue of it. Then a very short little section, verses 14 and 15, how the performance of duty mustn't be affected by sense perceptions. And then from 26 to 30, a subsection, the soul cannot be killed and the body cannot be saved. So fight. Why not? Yes. Soul can't be killed, body can't be saved. What can you do? So if you have to fight, if it's really just the thing you've got to do, just do it. So then we went through verse 11, actually. We went through verse 11. We don't need to read through it again, but let me just read the verse again. It is Lord Krishna chastising Arjuna in really very strong ways, very strong ways. The Supreme Personality of Godhead said, while speaking learned words, you are mourning for what is not worthy of grief. Those who are wise lament neither for the living nor for the dead. So this is a chastisement from, we can say, from the spiritual master. Krishna is acting as the spiritual master. Of course, we all know Krishna is the Supreme Lord, but here he's acting very specifically as the spiritual master. And he's doing what is a duty of a spiritual master, and that is pointing out the nonsense in clear ways, so the disciple will think, oh, I see, right. And if that impact is there, then the change of behavior and so on can be there. Yes. So, you know how Prabhupada told the story, how he was chastised by Srila Bhaktisiddhanta. in an evening program up, I believe, up on the roof in the house, a roof of the house of in Altadanga Road. There was a devotee sitting next to Prabhupada right at the back, couldn't hear properly, and he was from time to time asking Prabhupada, what did he say? What did he say? And Prabhupada would tell him what Srila Bhaktisiddhanta said. But Srila Bhaktisiddhanta, he saw it and he didn't appreciate. And he actually chastised Prabhupada and said, you, Babu, because they're right at the opposite ends of the space there. You, Babu, would you like to come and sit here in the speaker's seat? Would you like to speak in front of a fair number of devotees? What an embarrassing situation. But Prabhupada said that he really appreciated it. And he said that from time to time, he would remember that incident, and he relished that. He relished that remembrance. All right, so now we go on to verse 12, which is, it's an important verse. It is really the first verse in which Lord Krishna gives some specific instruction about what is the soul. Who are we really? So, okay, so let's read that. Like I said, it's a fairly well-known verse. Never was there a time when I did not exist, nor you, nor all these kings, nor in the future shall any of us cease to be. So yes, I'll just touch on some of the points in the purport. It is an extensive purport. It's 3 paragraphs. And Prabhupada begins by pointing out how Krishna is maintaining all living entities, how he's in the heart of every living entity. And he makes a nice point. Only saintly persons who can see within and without the same Supreme Lord can actually attain to perfect and eternal peace. That's an interesting point. Then Prabhupada quotes Katha Upanishad. The first 2 lines are famous, how the Lord is maintaining all living entities. Then Srila Prabhupada, just after that verse, the Sanskrit, for the rest of that paragraph, or the next paragraph if you like, Srila Prabhupada starts arguing against Mayavad, that the Lord says clearly that he and Arjuna and all the other kings and just everyone assembled there, everyone is an individual. They're eternal individuals. It's not just in this life we're individuals and then later we won't be. Everyone's an eternal individual. But of course, well, like was mentioned just above, the Lord is maintaining all the other individuals. So the individuality existed in the past, it's existing now, and we can just assume it's going to exist in the future. So yeah, strongly against Mayavad. Then the following paragraph, which it's a bit of a mega paragraph actually, and really essentially essentially Prabhupada is addressing the same point in different types, from different types of perspectives. Anti-Mayavad, well, the same point about being an individual in the past that we already mentioned. And Krishna's maintaining his individuality. And if what Krishna says is not true, then what's the point of reading Bhagavad Gita, which the Mayavadis are very fond of, actually? Yeah. So, but in order to really understand, Srila Prabhupada makes the point, in order to really get this, you have to be a devotee. You have to be a devotee. Otherwise, if you read any of the commentaries and explanations by the Mayavadis, then you'll become confused. And Prabhupada makes the point at the end of the purport that Lord Chaitanya has forbidden us to read the Mayavadi commentaries. Mayavadi aparadi. Yes. So anyway, it's like that, emphasizing the individuality, but at the same time emphasizing the differences between Lord Krishna in his individuality and the individuality of the jiva's souls. Okay, now we go on to verse 13, and this is really an important verse. In fact, an interesting little point is that this verse, according to the records we have, this verse is the verse out of all verses in whatever, Bhagavad Gita, Bhagavatam, anything, anywhere you can find verses, that Srila Prabhupada lectured on the second most was this verse 13 in chapter 2. And there are, if you can get your hands on the Bhagavad Gita lecture books, the transcriptions, or on computer, the folio Veda base, then you'll see there are, as I recall, about 13 recorded classes by Srila Prabhupada on verse 13. And that definitely indicates something. It is an important point. Okay, so Lord Krishna says, as the embodied soul continuously passes in this body from boyhood to youth to old age, the soul similarly passes into another body at death. But a sober person is not bewildered by such a change. Yes, okay, so this is just one of the most foundational verses when it comes to understanding the nature of the soul, when it comes to understanding the transmigration of the soul within the material world. You don't get much more important and clear verses than this. And, well, let's just make a few little points that from the verse itself, we can see that during this lifetime, I think all of us who are participating in this seminar, we're all adults, I think. And so, even someone like me, Well, Prabhupada would say that every 7 years, every cell in your body is replaced with a new one. Means every 7 years, you could say, and Prabhupada put it that way, every 7 years you have a new body. So in other words, if you are, say, 21, 22, that sort of age, you are now in your 4th body. You've already finished with 3 bodies. What about someone like me? Hare Krishna, 69. Oh my God. It's, oh well, okay, such is like life. But what about Ram Govinda Maharaj? Sure. 78, yeah? 78, Hare Krishna. So he's just in his 12th body, or something like that if we use these terms. But the point that Lord Krishna makes, first of all, is that during the course of this lifetime, not just every 7 years, but as we change practically on a daily basis, our body is changing. You know, men generally shave. Yeah, we shave our heads too, and our faces. So, and I must say that Srila Prabhupada appreciated that, definitely. He definitely didn't appreciate that sort of, fuzzy appearance, particularly amongst the initiated devotees and devotees who are trying to take it seriously. I shaved my face this morning. I shaved my head on Sunday. I think on Saturday or Sunday coming, I will shave my head again because, well, you can see it, can't you? It's already coming. My body has changed. My body has changed. Yes. So from childhood, from a baby to just a child, to a teenager, all these changes are going on. And the way Lord Krishna is putting it is that these are all different bodies. You've had a number of bodies, and even from day to day, you cannot say, I am in the same body. I remember once, I don't know if I should mention this, but once I saw many years ago an article in some news something, really, really many years ago. Maybe it was in my youth. And devotees, I don't know if you've ever heard of an Australian criminal called Ned Kelly. You heard of him? Ned Kelly, boy, he's famous to this day. Massively famous from, 100 years ago or something. Anyway, long time ago. And, eventually, of course, they killed him. But he was such a character. Such a character. So Ned Kelly had a gun. And when they killed him, they took his gun and put it in a museum. But that was, 100 or more years ago, whatever it was. It was a good time ago. And in due course of time, the gun deteriorated. First, they had to change the barrel, put a new one on. Then they had to change the handle because it just sort of, dissolved or whatever. Then they had to change the middle bit. It looked the same. But then this article was there that this is not Ned Kelly's gun. It's a different gun. It may look the same, but it's not actually. So like this, our bodies are changing. And you cannot say, particularly over several years or 10 years or something, you cannot say that it's the same body. Yes. So, Krishna says, the soul similarly passes into a completely different body at the time of death. But just as we have not been upset, with our changes of body during the course of this life, so a sober person is not bewildered by the change of body at the time of death. Prabhupada says, it is a very simple thing. Suppose a young man, a boy, changes his body, bodily symptoms, just like a boy has no mustache or beard, but all of a sudden he grows hair. Does he cry? Oh, why I am growing hair? Why I'm growing? Generally, young people, they look forward to getting older and bigger and stronger and everything. Yes. Let's just look at a couple of points here. Where is it now? Yes. The body, well, in the first paragraph, Prabhupada makes a very interesting point. It's almost tongue-in-cheek that Bhishma and Drona are old. They are old. And when you get old, life, you just can't live the way you used to live. You just can't do it because of the body, because the body's old. So Prabhupada says that, let's see, this individual soul finally changes the body at death and transmigrates to another body. And since it's sure to have another body in the next birth, either material or spiritual, there was no cause for lamentation by Arjuna on account of death, neither for Bhishma nor for Drona, for whom he was so much concerned. Rather, he should rejoice for their changing bodies from old to new ones, thereby rejuvenating their energy. They're getting a good deal. You're going to get a new body. You know, it's like if you have some ancient car. Can you imagine having a 70-year-old car? And someone says, hey, look, we'll take the old car and we'll give you a new one. Whoa, really? Free? It's a good deal. Okay, all right. Prabhupada again addresses this in the third paragraph. Well, actually, the second paragraph. In the verse, the word dhira is used, which means a sober person, self-controlled, not necessarily self-realized, but definitely self-controlled. So in the second paragraph, Prabhupada gives a definition, you could say, of a person who is a dhira. Any man who has perfect knowledge of the constitution of the individual soul, the supersoul in nature, both material and spiritual, is called a dhira, or a most sober man. Such a man is never deluded by the change of bodies. Just bear that in mind if you're going to be sitting there, doing the Bhakti Shastri. You may get asked about that. What's a dhira? And then there's another term which is in the third paragraph somewhere. Somewhere, he said, we are kshara. Oh, here it is. It's just a few lines down in the third paragraph. Prabhupada again is talking about how we're fragments, we're individuals eternally. We were in the past, we are now, and what makes us think we will not be in the future? History repeats itself. But as confirmed in the Gita, the fragmental portions of the Supreme exist eternally, Sanatan, and are called kshara. That is, they have a tendency to fall down into material nature. Kshara. You know, I believe, I understand, I've been told, to put it that way, that there will be a question, what is kshara? What does it mean about in relation to the soul? And just last point I'll mention here, Lord Krishna says a sober person, a dhira, one of these dhiras, is not bewildered by the change of body at the time of death. Of course, basically nobody is bewildered by the changes of body during the course of life. But a sober person, it doesn't even necessarily have to be like a fully God-realized, self-realized, transcendental person, but at least a sober person who's really focused nicely and very steady and stable internally. Such a person, when the time of death comes, such a person will not be bewildered by that. It's interesting. Doesn't even necessarily have to be totally on the transcendental platform. So, let's see. Let's go on to verse 14. And like we mentioned, 14 and 15, we've just entered into a slightly different theme. It's just a little variation. It's an important variation. So 14 and 15 are separated from 11 to 13 and then 16 to 24. They're separated in terms of theme. And the theme is that performance of duty must not be affected by our sensory perceptions, hot, cold, and all these types of things. We must continue performing our duty, regardless of how our senses are perceiving the external world. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. So let me just read now verse 14. It's another classic verse. It's just one of the first verses you should learn, if you're going to learn verses from Bhagavad Gita, which you should do. O son of Kunti, the non-permanent appearance of happiness and distress, and their disappearance in due course, are like the appearance and disappearance of winter and summer seasons. They arise from sense perception, O scion of Bharata, and one must learn to tolerate them without being disturbed. So tolerate. Tolerance is a really important quality for a devotee. If you're too touchy, overly sensitive, it's going to be difficult for you in Krishna consciousness. It may be too difficult, but at best it's just going to be difficult. But if you're really tolerant, then in many ways, life will be easier for you in Krishna consciousness. So Prabhupada in the purport brings out important points that in winter, it depends which part of the world you're in. Here it's winter right now, and it's fairly cool. By Durban standards, it's less than 20 degrees. It's pretty cold. Anyway, I think it's even maybe less than 15. So, but still you have to take your bath early in the morning in winter. You know, I have a feeling, well, anyway, you got to do that. I don't know, I couldn't say, but maybe Prabhupada is referring to in India, where the people in the villages at least, they take a bath outside from the pump, the hand pump or the well. And in winter, in North India particularly, it gets colder than Durban. Oh, it gets considerably colder than Durban. It gets down to 0. But still you've got to go outside and take your bath outside. Yeah. But in the summer when, at least in India, particularly North India, but maybe particularly the whole of India practically, and it really gets so hot. Still, a woman has to cook over the flame for the family. And it may take, if they've got a number of children, it may take a while. And you're right there on the heat. And outside, it may be well over 40 degrees. And inside, it may be also. So you got to do it. And that's just in ordinary life. What to speak of if you're a devotee and you want to go back to Godhead. So similarly, for Arjuna, as a Kshatriya, it's his duty to fight. And it doesn't really matter who he has to fight against. If it's fighting, he's got to do it. And it's the same principle as a woman having to cook in summer, people having to bathe even outside in winter. So then in the second paragraph, Prabhupada again refers to the phenomenon of different names in different situations. Prabhupada says, the 2 different names of address given to Arjuna are also significant. To address him as Kanteya signifies his great blood relations from his mother's side, Kunti. His name becomes Kanteya. The names, they based on the name of a parent, but some difference may be there. And to address him as Bharat signifies his greatness from his father's side, because the family, there was a great King Bharat long before in the family. Yeah. So from both sides, he's supposed to have a great heritage. A great heritage brings responsibility in the matter of proper discharge of duties. Therefore, he cannot avoid fighting. Okay. Let's go on to 15. It's the same little subsection. And here, Lord Krishna emphasizes, tolerance again. Tolerance, detachment, like that. O best among men, Arjuna, the person who's not disturbed by happiness and distress, and is steady in both, is certainly eligible for liberation. And Prabhupada says in the purport, anyone who's steady in his determination for the advanced stage of spiritual realization and can equally tolerate the onslaughts of distress and happiness is certainly a person eligible for liberation. And Prabhupada goes on. Prabhupada makes the point, anyone who's serious about making his life perfect surely adopts the sannyas way of life. Okay. Okay. Yeah. And when you do that, you have to cut the family ties and just separate and become independent of them. For some people, I'm sure for many people, that would really be difficult. But for your spiritual advancement, you got to do it. And if you can do it, it means you have some qualification for liberation. Yeah. Lord Chaitanya took sannyas when he was 24 for a higher cause. So let's see. All right. So let's carry on. Now the next section is from, 16 to, 16 to 26. From 16 to 26. Let's see what progress we can make here. Like we said, it's a return to the previous section, 11 to 13, that death is just a matter of the soul changing bodies, so it's not such a big thing. Don't make a big issue of it. And these are very interesting and worthwhile verses, really good verses. So in 16, it's another sort of, you could say, slap in the face for Arjuna. Those who are seers of the truth have concluded that of the non-existent, the material body, there is no endurance, and of the eternal, the soul, there is no change. This they've concluded by studying the nature of both. So in the purport, Srila Prabhupada does discuss this idea of non-existent as opposed to existent or eternal. Non-existent, the material body is described as being non-existent, not on the basis of it being some sort of, I don't know, what would you say, hallucination. Like, it's just not there, but you think it's there, but actually it just isn't there at all. It's not like that. This idea of non-existence is not like that. Like our bodies don't exist. That's what the Buddhists say. The Mayavadis, the Mayavadis say we're not the body, Brahma Satyam Jagan Mithya. The body is false. It's like an hallucination. Like a classic example. If someone is in the desert, I'm sure you've heard of that type of example. Someone's in the desert and they're very hot and they're becoming a bit disoriented, but then they see up in front, it looks like some water, but it's not. It's a mirage. Due to the interaction of the sunlight with the atmosphere, somehow or other, it looks like there's a body of water up in front, but there isn't. It's just an hallucination. It does not exist. Yes. So the body is being stated by Lord Krishna very clearly here to be non-existent, but not in that sense. In the sense that it has no endurance. It's here today, it's gone tomorrow, or, after some years. And even like we said just a little earlier, that from what to speak of every 7 years getting a different body, but every day our body is at least a little different from how it was the day before. So in that sense, it's a subtle sense. Sometimes you've got to be really careful with people. You don't tell them things that are too subtle. Otherwise, they just start becoming confused. But this is the sense, and we should try to understand it in that sense. And, it's actually an interesting point that the quote-unquote non-existent nature of the body is going to be discussed a little further in, the next two verses. Next couple of verses, next two verses. All right, so, and those who are seers of the truth have concluded like this, so they don't worry about the body. So you, Arjuna, you're so concerned about the body, therefore you're not a seer of the truth. You are a seer of ignorance. You're a seer. You're seeing things in foolish ways, mistaken ways. So again, it's a bit of a slap in the face. So, okay, now verse 17. It's an important verse also. How the soul is eternal. We are eternal. That which pervades the entire body, you should know to be indestructible. No one is able to destroy that imperishable soul. And Prabhupada says here right at the beginning of the purport, this verse more clearly explains the real nature of the soul, which is spread all over the body, or at least its influence is. Its energy, consciousness, is spread all over the body. In this first paragraph, couple of verses are there quoted from Shvetashvata Upanishad and Chaitanya Charitamrita, explaining the minute size of the soul. Prabhupada, the first verse, Shvetashvata Upanishad, or say the second verse. There are innumerable particles of spiritual atoms which are measured as 1/10,000th of the upper portion of the hair. That's the size of the soul. Of course, we should also understand that it is not, as some people think, that we have a soul. I have a soul, you have a soul, everybody's got a soul. And, I've got a soul like I've got a right hand, I've got a left hand, there's a heart, and so on and so forth. So as I have all these things, I have a soul. Krishna consciousness means I am the soul. I am a soul. I'm an eternal, conscious, living being. So, yes. So these things are discussed there. Also, there's a third verse there, Mundaka Upanishad, and again, it's a pretty substantial purport. And the soul, just like the sun is way off there in the sky, but its energy is spread out. So the soul is situated in the region of the heart, but its energy, consciousness, is spread out all over the body. So here, I hit my hand, I feel it. That is the consciousness of the soul, which is radiating out, just like the sunshine is radiating out. Let me just read a couple of sentences from the second to last paragraph, starting in the middle of that second to last paragraph. The individual atomic soul is definitely there in the heart, along with the supersoul. And thus all the energies of bodily movement are emanating from this part of the body. The corpuscles, do you understand what a corpuscle is? It's the sort of what the blood is made up of. Yeah, the ingredients that make up the blood. The corpuscles, which carry the oxygen from the lungs, gather energy from the soul. When the soul passes away from this position, the activity of the blood generating fusion ceases. Medical science accepts the importance of the red corpuscles, but it cannot ascertain that the source of the energy is the soul. Medical science, however, does admit that the heart is the seat of all energies of the body. Okay, let's go on to 18. See, what we do get here, there's a couple of verses, they're kind of similar to each other, emphasizing, maybe the same points to some degree, if not all the same, but at least somewhat same or similar, or actually the same. So we won't say so much about verse 18, but let's just read the verse. The material body of the indestructible, immeasurable, and eternal living entity is sure to come to an end. Therefore fight, O descendant of Bharat. Yes, so the body it's not a matter of if the body will die, it's simply a matter of when. Just a question of time. So the body can't be saved. No matter what you do, the body can't be saved, but the soul can't be killed. Can't even be seen, actually. And as we'll see as we go on, probably tomorrow night, the body, the soul, what to speak of it not being possible to kill the soul. You cannot even harm the soul slightly. Whatever you like to do, it's not going to have any effect on the soul at all. Right. So let's go on to 19. Neither he who thinks the living entity the slayer, nor he who thinks it slain is in knowledge. For the self slays not, nor is slain. Very classical Old English language. Yeah. So Prabhupada explains in the purport that the living entity is not killable. Anyone who thinks that the soul kills or is killed is just in ignorance. Who's he talking about? Arjuna. Arjuna's in such a state about people getting killed. But actually, such a person is in ignorance. Prabhupada, in the purport, makes some interesting points that even though this is the case, but this does not encourage the killing of the bodies of other people. It doesn't encourage, Prabhupada says in the later part of the purport, nor does understanding that the living entity is not killed encourage animal slaughter. Killing the body of anyone, human or animal, without authority is abominable. But Arjuna is being engaged in killing for the principle of religion and not whimsically. Yes, he's killing on behalf of Krishna, so it's not sinful like these other types of killing. And Prabhupada makes a comment elsewhere. Foolish people are suspicious of Krishna's taking part in the battle of Kurukshetra, not knowing that his taking part ensured liberation for all who were present on the battlefield. It is said by Bhishma Dev that all who were present on the battlefield of Kurukshetra attained their original spiritual existences after death. Therefore, hearing the war topics of the Lord is as good as any other devotional service. Yeah, we shouldn't think that hearing about Krishna, for example, killing the demons, or all the killing in the battle of Kurukshetra, in our literatures, you do get a reasonable amount of killing goes on. But we shouldn't think that this is, not as nice, not as important, not as transcendental as other more sort of obviously by our standards pleasant aspects of his pastimes. Okay, now I'm going to read verse 20. It's a really important verse. So many of these verses are really important. If you ask me, I consider 13, 14, and this 20 of the verses we've been looking at this evening, I consider them to be the most important, but actually the others are also. So, Krishna here is giving further definition, characteristics of the soul. For the soul, there's neither birth nor death at any time. He has not come into being, he does not come into being, and will not come into being. He's unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and primeval. He's not slain when the body is slain. So no birth, no death, has not come into being. There was never a time when the soul didn't exist, does not come into being. Souls do not come into being. And will not come into being in the future. Unborn, eternal, ever-existing, and Purana, primeval, ancient. Primeval, Purana. Purana basically means incredibly ancient. Purana basically means more or less timelessly ancient. That's the nature of the soul. So Srila Prabhupada goes on to distinguish the nature of the soul as described here, as we've just read, with the nature of the body. This is now, we're in the first paragraph, right at the beginning, almost the exact beginning. The body is subject to 6 kinds of transformations. It takes its birth from the womb of the mother's body. It remains for some time. It grows, produces some effects, gradually dwindles, and at last vanishes into oblivion. So these are the typical characteristics of the body. Every body goes through these 6 stages: birth, remaining, growing, producing side effects, dwindling, gradually sort of deteriorating, and then dying. But the soul does not go through those things. And even Prabhupada makes a point. It's about 2/3 of the way down in this first paragraph. The soul does not at any time become old as the body does. The so-called old man, therefore, feels himself to be in the same spirit as in his childhood or youth. I can confirm that. I think Jai Sachinandan Prabhu can too. There's this feeling, yeah, we can do things. The body can't do it so much. But there's the desire and the sort of the mood. Yeah, why not? But the body can't cooperate. And so why is it like that? Because we are souls. And we are feeling our eternal spiritual nature to some degree. Just to some degree. So then the purport continues. It really continues, doesn't it? It's another fairly extensive purport. Let's see, where are we? Yes. Okay, here's another very important point which comes up in this purport. It is, where would you say it is? In the sort of middle purport. Yeah. The soul is full of knowledge, or full always with consciousness. That paragraph. Just after the verse from Katha Upanishad. Just after that, the first verse which is quoted. So we call this paragraph, Finding the Soul. Let us locate the soul. Let us find the soul. So Prabhupada makes the point that even if you can't actually find the soul in the heart, one can still understand the presence of the soul by the presence of consciousness. Similarly, sometimes in the sky you can't see the sun if it's very cloudy, but still you can understand that the sun is present because it's daytime. Shri Shri Radha Radhanath Shri Giri Govardhan Shri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu Ki Jai. Just bear with me just for 2 minutes, please, and then we'll finish. So, yeah, by the presence of the daylight, you can understand that the sun is present, even though you can't see the sun if it's a very cloudy day. So similarly, by the presence of consciousness, we can understand the presence of the soul. Because the body the body it's composed of material elements, and none of those elements are known to exhibit consciousness. The body's 70 or 80% water, whatever it is, and obviously water has no consciousness. The bones are mainly calcium, I believe, and calcium has no consciousness, and so on and so forth. So yes, like this, the presence of the soul can be understood by implication by the presence of consciousness. And then in the last paragraph, Prabhupada just touches on an important point, that there's the soul and the super soul. Soul and super soul. Distinguishing between these two as we go on further is going to become important. Hare Krishna. Srila Prabhupada Ki Jai.